Hey everyone, quick intro here. This is a continuation of the Aegis Draft League from last week where we went 3-0, which is a very fun, exciting time. This week almost didn't go as well, but we still ultimately prevailed and got to qualify for playoffs. But I still wanted to highlight one interesting match, which was me versus MajiinBae, who was on the Misfortune Powder Monkeys. This matchup was especially exciting because I got to face off against MajiinBae on ladder across multiple different seasons many times. And this is the first time I really got to face off against him in a tournament setting. And I do respect him a ton as a player, so to have a match this close and fun was pretty neat. One more thing before the video starts, I am trying a little bit of a different format with this video. Normally what you see on Runeterra YouTube content is you see people just take the live stream footage and just post it to YouTube. If you do prefer that whole thing, I actually have my entire stream VOD of the match versus MajiinBae directly on YouTube, unlisted. But if you like what you see with this format, please let me know in the comments. Like, share, comment, subscribe, all that stuff, give feedback, it's all appreciated. With all that out of the way, let's get into the video and I'll see you for next one. So now that YouTube intro prism is out of the way, let's get straight into the match analysis. So I was hoping to hit this matchup of Cosmic Call Jace into Seraphine set. I would say that this is favored because Ionia can't really interact well with what you're trying to do if you hit the Cosmic Call early on. You can land an early Destroyer, Great Beyond, or Scourge and keep threatening huge damage each turn starting round 6 or 7 depending on the token. And it can't stall forever if you do this fast enough. Either that or you get a Living Legends and do a big combo turn later on and obliterate the opponent. I will say that with that in mind, I feel like the mulligan could have been a bit better. While I do think keeping Formula is okay in the matchup to get an extra draw and a chance at Cosmic Call, keeping the Aftershock was a bit suspect. Because while my main lose condition is Majin getting his landmarks early on, the draw is kind of dead if he doesn't have it, which you'll eventually see, and if he did have his landmarks, he could have an easy answer of my Aftershock with stuff like Notify and Deny. While outside of Majin's deck having some odds at beating me if he sticks an early landmark, the real lose condition of this matchup is just not finding Cosmic Call at all. And losing out on one free draw on the mulligan can be potentially painful. I will say historically before Cosmic Call, Ionia has been fairly good into slower PNZ Targon style lists, because well, depending on your build, their interaction can really pain you with stuff like stuns, recalls, and denies for your big spells. However, Cosmic Call has flipped the script as long as you can find it. With the way how these draws panned out, I eventually settled on casting my Epic Scrap Traptions, because if I can cast both of them for at least 6 mana, it'll level up the Jace, and if I can stick a level 2 Jace and eventually draw a Cosmic Call, double casting Cosmic Call with Jace at 12 mana could be a win condition as well. I tried to play the Jace early on and see if I can stick him so I can double cast Acceleration Gate and maybe threaten Majin, but unfortunately Majin found the perfect answer of a Hex Obliterator, and I tried matching that answer with Blessing of Targon, but at that point Jace would still die to a Mystic Shot style effect. But I do get sad that the Seraphine spell perfectly lines up with the Hex Split to disintegrate the Jace. Ultimately it didn't matter since there was a high note in Majin's hand, so regardless of Seraphine, Jace was still dead there. At this point in the matchup, I kind of want to explain assessing situations of how matchups can quickly go from favored to unfavorable depending on a bunch of different things. Both of us are not drawing well. Majin's not getting his landmarks, I'm not getting my Cosmic Call. If you check out the live VOD of this match in the description, I do mention that when both decks are missing on their ace cards, the Seraphine set deck actually becomes favored in the matchup, because of the way how their removal and answers line up to your threats, and you'll eventually slowly be grinding out of the game thanks to their sets and big cats and Seraphines and whatnot. At this point, you can tell I'm kind of floundering around with these bad draws. I try to answer the Seraphine with as little removal as possible. While the first one does die, it usually means there's a second one on the way if there's no fight for it. Scrap Traption keeps getting chump blocked, so I can't really use it to threaten damage effectively, and I try and chase after the second Seraphine with a Mystic and High Note combo, but Ionia has a plethora of ways to keep their units safe. And yeah, after making it this late in the game, with Set arriving and not finding Cosmic Call, the game's pretty much over. I can stall out for a fair bit of time, but Big Cat will eventually arrive, and Targon, while it does have temporary answers with stuff like silences and stuns and obliterates, you can't really stall as well as Ionia can, especially since they do have ways to answer your answers. I think outside of keeping Aftershock in the mulligan and just not drawing Cosmic Call ever, I do think there were a couple things I could have done a bit differently this game. I could have maybe considered using Scrap Traption earlier on turn 3 to start the clock and start eating his chump blocker sooner. I could have also considered not playing the Jace, but I felt I was just so far behind because I wasn't winning the game already that I probably should have just done some more riskier stuff, and I think playing the Jace in that regard is a fine thing with the context involved. But I do think this goes to show and highlight those slight weaknesses of Cosmic Call, at least this version of the deck. With others like Diana Samira, you kind of at least have like other win conditions to focus on beside Cosmic Call. But if you're in a matchup where you do need the Cosmic Call and you just don't find it, you definitely do flounder around just like the rest of this game. At this point, I imagine the Nye's in their hand, and I Hail Mary my Supernova hoping they don't have it to hopefully kill their Set and second Seraphine. But they do, and I just quickly go into the next game, because there's not much point in fighting this left without finding Cosmic Call. Into game 2, we're up against Shen Jarvan as Cosmic Jace. In this matchup, you have to get onto the board much more quickly, so you have to look harder for stuff like Forge Chief, Forge of Tomorrow, Epic Scrap Traption, all that good stuff. This is a pretty difficult matchup at times, depending on how well they draw. Like, if they find Shen early, you're kind of sad. Here, I'm down to use the Aftershock on the Kinko student, because we have the Forge Chief already, and just getting this out of the way before Shen comes down is a godsend, because it really delays his level up progress if she's not there. With this Badger Bear attack, Majin tips off the idea that his hand is not good and lacks Shen. Otherwise, he would have just developed him here since I lack Sunburst in this version. It also gives me an extra mana thanks to the Forge Chief block, which threatens casting a 6 mana spell, and he quickly noted himself that the attack wasn't ideal after committing.
Our hand's very slow.
We're working here!
Yeah, give my opponent a 6er here, so if they have like Scrap Traption, this is a super mistake. I probably should have just not attacked at all.
But yeah, regardless of all that, I didn't have the Epic Scrap Traption or Cosmic Call off of Clockling to punish too hard. With this attack I'm doing with the Clockling, I'm kind of doing it kind of like an open pass, so to say. If it trades with the Badger Bear, I'm fine with that. If I get 2 free chip damage, it's whatever. Getting the form up out of MajiinBae's hand here also felt good, because then it meant that my future damage-based removal, like the Rocket Barrage, has higher odds of being effective in the future. At this point in the game, I was low-key scared of the one of the Nye here, because I imagined his hand was either clunky with expensive units or more spell-focused. I also only decide to rip the Rocket Barrage, because if it works, it's such a big swing. And after this Rocket Barrage lands and kills the Badger Bear and second Kinky student, I feel incredibly safe for the immediate future of the game, as even the open attack with Jarvan isn't enough to threaten me. That, and I also finally found my Cosmic Call. I got a Living Legend off the Omni Invoke instead of the Big Voke, which is kind of funny. Compared to game 1, I really don't have too much room to complain. I'm drawing well, Majin's draws are lacking, and the Living Legends is also high quality with letting me play the Golden Sisters, all while holding up enough mana to Supernova thanks to the Moon Silver the Living Legends picked up too. Game 2 is pretty much a reverse of game 1, where one of us is floundering around waiting for the other one to sling enough cards to bring us to the next game in the series. I do want to highlight the simple heads up play from Majin, where he elects to single combat the Elusive Sister over the Lifesteal one, since at this point in the game, if I'm gonna win, it'll probably be through the constant over the top elusive chip damage. It's not going to be through me getting extra health from lifesteal since I'm already topped off, and the Great Beyond just accentuates the idea as there's nothing left Majin can do to answer after he plays Sign-In. While these first games weren't really climactic and were pretty much one side from the both of us, I do promise that game 3 is much more exciting and closer than the other two. For the final match of the series, we have Neela Janna versus Shen Jarvan. In my opinion, I feel like this is Neela Janna favored. The only thing I feel I have to worry about this match is having an adequate answer to Spirit's Refuge, which Majin does have 3 of. This game starts off fast since I get Lookout and Neela swinging on turn 2, so this hand makes me want to play incredibly quickly before Spirit's Refuge can feasibly matter. One main goal I have for this round is I want to try and play Pool Shark before the round ends. It improves my odds of finding Miriam or Slipstream next turn, which would let me be able to play my Windborn Mariner that I just drew for free. It also gives me a better chance in finding Janna and start updrafting and discounting more cards. One slight misplay is I was concerned if I wanted to make it rain while the Explorer attacked to prevent a Jarvan level up progress, but I decided to save it after the combat to see if he'd still be willing to use a form up after the fact. It's a very minor error, and it really ultimately doesn't end up mattering the slightest. Thankfully, this line I chose to follow does get rewarded, as I draw into Mariam thanks to Pool Shark's effect, which helps me play out my entire hand, and this gives me a 5-wide board that can attack by round 4. The next couple of turns, I want to keep going as wide and as aggressive as I possibly can be. I like the Neela and the 3-1 swinging because whoever gets blocked by the Badger Bear will allow the other one to connect and get more guaranteed damage in. However, I will say that I think swinging with the Pool Shark was a misplay. Here, he got value blocked when I didn't need that 1 extra damage, and if the Explorer felt compelled to chump block the rest of the board if Pool Shark didn't swing, that would have been 1 less blocker that MajiinBae had in the future. And thanks to this misplay, the Explorer now effectively gets a 2-for-1 by being able to trade into the Windborne Mariner after killing the Pool Shark, which hurts my odds of being able to burn him out. The next round does get a bit rough, as I kind of go all in on my fleeting draw, and Majin correctly identifies that he can hold my fleeting cards in hand hostage if he keeps passing back to me. After being sad at the prospect of losing Janna to the Screeching Dragon, I ultimately throw her in front of the dragon to get a mid-match mulligan on my hand for the next round. For the rest of the game, the match is starting to an interesting dynamic. I'm always under the assumption that MajiinBae probably has a Spirit's Refuge in hand, which I'll show a screenshot of in a bit to confirm that he always did have it at this point in the game. And I have to see if I can force MajiinBae to either commit below 4 mana, or if I can hold his other meaningful plays hostage by preventing him from ever falling below that critical 4 mana breakpoint. Also, a slightly funny note, he mentioned on air that he forgot blocking Badger Bear would have been able to block there, so I could have had 2 free damage in. So it's funny when one can admit a potential funny misplay on stream. As I mentioned before, this game entirely comes down to me playing around Spirit's Refuge. While I could play Eye of the Storm to potentially trade V-Crush into the dragon, if I do that, it gives MajiinBae a chance to respond and play Spirit's Refuge and turn the game wide open in his favor. So I ultimately refrained from doing so, since that was the plan I set out to do for the entire game. The next couple of rounds are interesting because the both of us are trying to make as little commitment as possible in showing what the blowouts in our hands can be. Since I'm still assuming that he has stuff like Farm Up and Spirit's Refuge, and he can imagine I have stuff like Mystic Shots and Divine Whirlwinds, it's bonkers at how long this game went on without me finding at least one Divine Whirlwind at this point. I was hoping to play one before Elefante. Also, fun side note, it's a very rare misplay that I thought that this was the second single combat that was already cast in this game, and the reason why I thought that was because I blurred games 2 and 3 together. But it's not like this incorrect assessment mattered, as I'm always forced to play my second Neela here, since she would simply get Cataclysm next turn if I chose to play her in the following round. So at this point in the game, I'm starting to feel a bit pinched and nervous. I've lost my second Neela, any big unit I choose to develop will be thrown directly in front of the Jarvan for free, and I still have yet to find any of my Divine Whirlwinds, which are some of the best cards in this matchup. Not finding any Divine Whirlwind also severely diminishes the value that Elefante can provide me in trying to burn Majin out of this game. So here, I have to continue with my original plan of pinching Majin's mana by fighting for board and preventing the Spirit's Refuge for as long as I possibly can. And thankfully, I draw cheap cards and removal which lets me pass back to him without committing too much of my mana. And it forces Majin to get worried and potentially lose out to the answers that he thinks that I just drew. Here, I'm able to fork his plays by showing a Howling Gale in his face. If he uses Form Up or Spirit's Refuge to save the dragon, I can use Mystic Shot to allow Howling Gale to kill or connect properly. Ultimately, the next sequence of deciding when to cast this Mystic Shot in response to MajiinBae's Cataclysm ended up being the most vital part of this entire match. If I do it before, I get the chance to save my bird, but this opens up MajiinBae in being able to feel safe in casting Spirit's Refuge and Form Up if he has either. If I do it after, I lose my bird, but I do avoid MajiinBae playing the Refuge, so I ultimately decided to go with that line, where even Majin noted it and complimented that this was my plan with these actions.
If they respond with a 2 damage spell, I still probably just Spirit's Refuge. I think I can trick you. They just let it through, huh? Okay. Oh, perhaps waiting to pop the barrier with it. That's very smart. Yeah, so then I Form Up. To try to keep him alive. Do I Form Up or do I just let him go? I could just let him go and sign it. That was very heads up by my opponent to play around Spirit's Refuge.
So now that Majin feels compelled to not use the Refuge for this combat, this lets him feel like he has the opportunity to develop Sign-In. And now that Sign-In is developed and he doesn't have 4 mana anymore, that signals to me that I can go for a full swing here to try and push a bit more damage. I lose my entire board minus the Pool Shark, but I get to bring him down to 7 in combination with the Eye of the Storm. But still, things look daunting. MajiinBae suddenly has a commanding board lead and can still play a Spirit's Refuge at any point and nullify all the burn I've been playing towards the entire game. Thankfully, with his heavy metal, I can threaten to kill this Greenglade Caretaker, which will either force a form up, which won't let him cast a Spirit's Refuge, or if he tries a Spirit's Refuge, then I can try and land the Make It Rain and pop the barrier, which will remove his ace card that he's been holding on to for the entire game. With Majin taking a while to decide what to do in this action, I safely assume that my suspicions that Spirit's Refuge existing is all but confirmed, and that I have to continue playing around that singular card. In the end, Majin will decide to use a form up to save Greenglade Caretaker, which will have him spend too much mana and prevent the usage of Spirit's Refuge this turn. This also means that I can't die to this open attack here, and he can't heal up and nullify my burn plan. Ultimately, after he attacks, instead of trying to prevent as much damage as possible, I go for the line to reduce his board size as much as possible instead. Now the keen-eyed viewers among you will probably be wondering, why didn't Prism go for Eye of the Storm instead of Slipstream with this Elefante? Surely drawing 2 cards for 0 mana this turn is better than drawing 2 cards for 1 mana next turn. And while that is true, in my head, I knew that Divine Whirlwind was the most important card to be drawn in the next turn, and if I do draw it, I need that extra mana discount to be able to play it alongside other cards in my hand. As a fun little extra, I show the math here of what the odds are of at least drawing at least 1 Divine Whirlwind, although it is a little bit off since I don't include the 1 Slipstream that was added into my deck. And here, my play is ultimately rewarded, because even though I still failed to find the Divine Whirlwind, saving the Slipstream for the following turn lets me play a second Windborn Mariner for free that I wouldn't have otherwise been able to play. At this point, I continue trying to line up removal to outnumber Majin's board and have the game end this turn. I know if I hit the fully charged Howling Gale on the Shen, then I can prove the odds of the following Make It Rain to better hit both of his 2 units with 1 health. But I'm still nervous since he can still have other cards in hand, one being the ever-present Spirit's Refuge that I've mentioned for this entire video. Despite my worries, the rest of my hand pretty much plays itself, and I go with the Howling Gale since I don't really have too many options remaining. I hope that with this Howling Gale, the supplemental Make It Rain and the Mystic Shot will do what they need to perform to get me the results that I need. But now that Majin tries to use the Shun spell to save him and his Greenglade Caretaker, I rip the Make It Rain and get the best possible hits with 5 targets showing. Funnily enough, when this happened live at this moment, I didn't realize that this was actually the best possible Make It Rain, so I felt a little bit disappointed. Still, I open swung, which let me find lethal even through the Spirit's Refuge. Finally, there's one last potential minor misplay to note, where if the game would have lasted any longer, I should have put the Neela to the right of the 3-1 Quick Attackers to force Majin to the side to block the Windborn Mariners instead of the Neela. But ultimately, it doesn't matter since I knew this game ended this turn even through the Spirit's Refuge. With this win, we go to playoffs, where we face off against Kuwako's team, where he has strong players in the form of Ikado, Rusticles, and Renrag. Thanks so much for watching, and continue subscribing, liking, commenting, and sharing if you enjoyed the video. Have a great day.